He only wanted to unravel a mystery, but what he heard from the former nuns left him speechless. In front of the millionaire, they confessed unimaginable secrets, revealing how they managed to circumvent the strict rule of chastity. The sun beat down on the facade of the towering glass and steel building in the heart of São Paulo's financial district. On the 40th floor, Tiago Mendonça gazed out at the city through the panoramic window of his office. At 45, he helmed one of the country's largest media conglomerates, Revealed Truth. His eponymous show had been a ratings leader for over a decade, unmasking religious charlatans and exposing false promises of miraculous healing. Mr. Mendonça, the editorial meeting starts in 5 minutes. The voice of his assistant, Renata, crackled through the intercom. "On my way," he replied, straightening his tie in the mirror. His reflection revealed a man whose confidence was his trademark: salt and pepper hair at the temples, an impeccably tailored suit, and eyes that seemed to pierce through the lies of others. In the conference room, his team awaited. They were the best investigative journalists in the country, individuals who had left promising careers at major outlets to join Tiago's crusade against what he called the faith industry. "Good morning, everyone," he said, taking his seat at the head of the table. "What do we have for the next special?" Carla Duarte, his head producer, slid a folder toward him. Something different came in this morning. An anonymous tip, but with disturbing details. Tiago flipped through the documents with growing interest. It concerned an old convent in Ouro Preto, Minas Gerais, where secret rituals had allegedly taken place for decades. The informant mentioned elderly former nuns now living in a nursing home in the same historic town. "How credible is this?" he asked, looking up from the folder. "We've verified some preliminary details," replied Rafael Santos, his lead researcher. The convent of Santa Clara did exist and was closed in 1985, supposedly due to structural issues with the building. The nuns were transferred to different congregations, and some of them are indeed at the Nossa Senhora da Piedade nursing home in Ouro Preto. Tiago leaned back in his chair, a smile forming on his lips. Nuns breaking vows of chastity in secret. Rituals. It could just be another run-of-the-mill scandal, but something tells me there's more to this story. "There's something else," Carla added. "The convent was located in the same region where your mother was born." An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Tiago's origins were a topic rarely broached. Adopted by a São Paulo couple, he had never hidden his roots, but had also never shown interest in unraveling his past. "An interesting coincidence," he said, maintaining a professional tone. "Dig deeper. If there's substance to this tip, I want to lead this investigation personally." That night, in his penthouse overlooking Ibirapuera Park, Tiago couldn't sleep. The images from the archive that Carla had sent to his phone lingered in his mind. Black and white photographs of the old convent, a stunning example of colonial architecture from Minas Gerais, and among the images, a group of young nuns posing solemnly in front of the entrance. One of those women looked strangely familiar. "Impossible," he murmured to himself, trembling as he zoomed in on the image. But the more he looked, the more the serene-faced young nun resembled the only photo he had of his biological mother. The next morning, Tiago called an emergency meeting. "I want a full team in Ouro Preto by the end of the week," he announced. "Discreet cameras, top-of-the-line equipment. We'll make it look like a documentary about elderly nuns, about their memories and retirement, nothing that raises suspicions." "Are you sure you want to get personally involved?" Carla asked, visibly concerned. "We could send André to conduct the interviews." "No," Tiago replied firmly. "This story requires my presence." 3 days later, an unmarked van pulled up in front of Asilo Nossa Senhora da Piedade, a yellow colonial mansion with blue windows in the historic center of Ouro Preto. The team unloaded equipment disguised as donations, cameras hidden in boxes of supplies, microphones concealed in floral arrangements. Tiago adjusted the hidden microphone on his lapel as Sister Conceição, the energetic woman in her 60s who ran the place, led them through the quiet hallways. "It's very kind of you to take an interest in our elderly sisters," she said. "Few people care about the stories they have to tell. That's exactly why we're here, sister, Tiago replied with his trademark TV smile. I believe the wisdom of these women deserves to be preserved. They arrived at a spacious room where several elderly women were gathered. Some were knitting, others reading, and a few simply gazed out the window at the garden. There were about 15 women, all over 70 years old. Ladies, Sister Conceição announced, this is Mr. Tiago Mendonça. He and his team are here to make a documentary about your lives in service to the church. Suspicious glances turned toward the newcomers. Among them, 3 women in particular caught Tiago's attention. Seated together in a corner of the room, they didn't show the same surprise as the others. It was as if they had been waiting for him. The eldest of the 3, a woman with white hair and a still elegant posture despite her age, locked eyes with him. Something in her piercing gaze sent a shiver down Tiago's spine. Pleasure to meet. You, he said, approaching the trio. And what are your names? I am Cecilia, replied the white-haired woman. And these are my sisters in vocation, Helena and Dulce. We were all from the convent of St. Clare. Tiago felt his heart quicken. These were exactly the women he had been searching for. I'm particularly interested in the history of that convent, he remarked, trying to sound casual. I've heard it was a very special place. Special is an interesting word to describe it, replied Donna Cecilia with an enigmatic smile. Why don't we sit in the garden? At this time of day, the sun is pleasant and we can speak with more privacy. In the asylum's inner garden, shielded by stone walls draped in ivy, Tiago positioned himself strategically so that the hidden camera on his lapel could capture the expressions of the former nuns. Carla and Raphael remained at a discreet distance, pretending to adjust lighting equipment. You're not here to make a simple documentary, are you? Asked Donna Helena, a thin woman with lively eyes and gnarled hands. We recognize the famous truth seeker. Tiago shifted in his seat, caught off guard by her directness. So, you're familiar with my work? We know more than you might think, replied Donna Dulce, the quietest of the 3, speaking for the first time. We've been waiting for you for a long time, Tiago Galvão. The use of his birth name, which he had abandoned after being adopted, struck him like a physical blow. No one had called him that in over 4 decades. How do you know that name? He asked, dropping all pretense. Donna Cecilia leaned forward, lowering her voice. Because we knew your mother, Antonia Galvão. She was with us at the convent, and what happened there changed the course of many lives, including yours. Tiago felt his throat go dry. In his years of debunking charlatans and exposing religious frauds, he had learned to maintain control, to never show surprise. But hearing his biological mother's name from this woman's lips completely unsettled him. How can I be sure you truly knew her? He asked, regaining his professional composure. Donna Cecilia smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She opened a small crocheted bag she carried with her and pulled out a faded yellowed photograph. With trembling hands, weathered by age, she extended it to Tiago. This is Antonia, at 22, when she entered the convent. The image showed his mother as he knew her from the only photo he had ever seen. Dark hair framing a delicate face with large, expressive eyes. But here she wore the traditional habit of a novice, and her expression revealed a mix of determination and apprehension. This proves nothing, Tiago said, handing the photograph back, though his heart raced. Anyone could get their hands on old pictures. You have a birthmark on the inside of your right wrist, shaped like a crescent moon, Donna Helena said calmly. Antonia had the same mark. She used to say it was a sign that the 2 of you were connected beyond this world. Instinctively, Tiago touched his right wrist, where the mark lay hidden beneath his shirt sleeve, a detail he had never shared publicly, known only to those closest to him. What happened to her? He finally asked, dropping all pretense. The 3 women exchanged meaningful glances. It was Donna Dulce who spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. To understand what happened to Antonia, you need to know what went on within the walls of Santa Clara. It was no ordinary convent. Please, Mr. Mendonça, Donna Cecilia interrupted. Turn off your hidden recording devices. What we are about to tell you must not be recorded. Not yet. Tiago hesitated, glancing at Carla, who watched from a distance. Against his better, professional judgment, he made a discreet gesture for the crew to shut everything down. This was no longer just another episode of his show, it had become a personal quest. "I'm listening," he said, removing the lapel microphone. Donna Cecilia closed her eyes for a moment, as if organizing distant memories. When she opened them again, her voice was steadier. The convent of Santa Clara was founded in 1872 by a little-known Portuguese religious order. From the beginning, there were rumors of unorthodox practices taking place there. Most of the young women who joined the order came from traditional families in Minas Gerais, sent more for social convenience than true a vocation. The convent was isolated a few kilometers from town, Donna Helena continued. This allowed certain activities to occur far from prying eyes. On the surface, we were just another religious community dedicated to prayer and charitable work. But beneath that surface, Donna Dulce paused meaningfully. There was what we called the communion. Tiago furrowed his brow. What kind of communion? It wasn't the traditional Eucharist, explained Donna Cecilia. It was a much older ritual, one that traced back to pre-Christian practices. The Mother Superior, Mother Inez, selected certain novices to participate. "We were chosen for our potential," she said. "Potential for what?" "To become vessels," replied Donna Helena, "for forbidden knowledge, for hidden light." Tiago suppressed a sigh of frustration. He was used to hearing this kind of vague, mystical language in his investigations. More often than not, it masked schemes of financial exploitation or abuse. "And how did this communion work?" he asked, trying to steer the conversation towards something more concrete. Donna Cecilia glanced around, ensuring no one else could overhear. The ritual took place on new moon nights, in the crypt beneath the chapel. We were led there in procession wearing white robes instead of our traditional habits. At the center of the crypt stood an ancient stone altar, said to have been brought from Portugal, though it seemed even older than that. "The Mother Superior instructed us to ritually break our vows of chastity," said Donna Helena, her tone disturbingly matter-of-fact given the shocking nature of her words. "But it wasn't an ordinary breaking, not as the outside world would understand it. There were no men involved. It was something far more transcendental." "Transcendental how?" Tiago asked, growing more intrigued. "During the ritual, it was believed that we connected with an entity, a presence not of this world," explained Donna Dulce, her voice trembling slightly. "The entity would temporarily possess us, and through that union we received certain gifts." "What kind of gifts?" "Some could see the future," replied Donna Cecilia. "Others developed the ability to know people's deepest secrets just by looking into their eyes. There were reports of inexplicable healings performed by those who took part in the ritual." "And you believed this?" Tiago asked, struggling to maintain the professional skepticism that defined him. "It's not a matter of belief," Donna Helena retorted with a piercing gaze. "We have witnessed the effects. Your mother, Antonia, was one of those who developed extraordinary abilities after undergoing the ritual." A shiver ran down Tiago's spine. "What abilities?" The three women exchanged glances once more. It was Donna Cecilia who answered. "Antonia could see beyond the veil that separates the worlds. She began making predictions with terrifying accuracy. She foresaw accidents in the city, natural disasters, even the closure of the convent years before it happened." She paused, looking directly into Tiago's eyes. "And she foresaw you, my son." "What do you mean?" "Even before she became pregnant, she spoke of a son who would be born, one who would one day uncover hidden truths, a son who would shake the foundations of faith with his quest for truth. She called you the Revealer." Tiago felt the world spinning around him. His entire professional life now seemed predestined, written by a prophecy made even before his birth. If she had such extraordinary abilities, why did she leave the convent? Why did she give me up for adoption? The questions spilled from his lips before he could stop them. "Antonia did not leave the convent by choice," Donna Helena said, her voice trembling for the first time. And she certainly did not abandon you willingly. She was forced to leave when they discovered her pregnancy. Forced by whom? Tiago leaned forward, tension evident in his body. By the entity itself, Donna Dulce replied, her voice quivering. The being that visited us during the rituals had strict rules. One of them was that none of the chosen ones could bear life. We were vessels for knowledge, not for children. That doesn't make sense, Tiago shook his head. Are you telling me that a supernatural entity expelled my mother from a convent because she became pregnant? It wasn't exactly like that, Donna Cecilia corrected. It was the Mother Superior who expelled her, fearing the consequences. Rumors about Antonia and her unexpected pregnancy had already spread through the community. Some said it was a miracle, an immaculate conception. Others, more pragmatic, suspected an affair with some man from the town. The truth, however, is far more complex. And what is the truth then? Asked Tiago, his patience wearing thin. The truth is that your conception was the direct result of the ritual, said Donna Helena. No man was involved. Antonia firmly believed that you were the son of the very entity that visited us during the communion. Tiago let out a dry laugh. Now you expect me to believe that I'm the child of some kind of deity I've spent my entire life debunking. These kinds of absurd stories. We're not asking you to believe anything, Donna Cecilia replied calmly. We're simply telling you what we know, what we witnessed. Your mother left this world convinced that she carried something extraordinary within her. And before she departed, she made us promise that when the time came, we would tell the truth to the son she still carried. And after she left here, what happened? We know she gave you up for adoption shortly after your birth, said Donna Dulce. Not out of a lack of love, but for protection. She believed you had a greater purpose in this world, and to fulfill it, you needed to grow up far from her and the danger she represented. Danger? What danger? All the women who underwent the ritual and developed abilities eventually met the same fate, Donna Cecilia explained, her voice dropping even lower. Unexplained disappearances, sudden illnesses, psychotic episodes. It was as if something was consuming them from within, slowly. Antonia knew her time was limited, and she didn't want you nearby to witness her deterioration. Tiago felt a wave of conflicting emotions, anger, confusion, sadness, and surprisingly, a strange sense of relief at finally learning part of his story. Where is she now? Is she still alive? The three women fell silent for a long moment. It was Donna Cecilia who finally answered, Antonia vanished 30 years ago. No one knows for certain what happened to her. The last contact we had was a letter sent shortly before her disappearance. In it, Antonia mentioned that she was being called and that her time had come. Called by whom? Tiago could barely contain the frustration in his voice. By the same being that visited her during the ritual, Donna Helena replied, the same presence that, according to her, was her true father. Tiago stood up abruptly. This is absurd. You've built an entire mythology around practices that were likely nothing more than the manipulation of vulnerable young people. Donna Cecilia didn't seem shaken by his reaction. Calmly, she retrieved another item from her crocheted bag, a yellowed envelope. This is the last letter we received from Antonia. It's addressed to you to be delivered when you were ready to know the truth. For years we waited, watching your journey from afar. When we learned you were investigating religious cases, we understood the moment had come. Tiago took the envelope with trembling hands. His name, Tiago Galvão, was written in a delicate script he had never seen before. The letter from a mother he had never known. There's one more thing you need to know, said Donna Dulce, urgency in her voice. The convent of Santa Clara may have been closed, but the rituals never completely ceased. There are powerful people who keep the tradition alive, in secret, and they won't be pleased when they find out you're investigating. Are you saying I'm in danger? Asked Tiago, slipping the envelope into the inner pocket of his jacket. We're saying you need to be careful, replied Donna Cecilia. There are forces at play that go beyond ordinary understanding, forces that shaped your existence even before you were born. At that moment, Tiago's phone buzzed. It was a message from Carla. We need to talk. Urgent. As he bid farewell to the former nuns, Tiago felt he was only beginning to scratch the surface of a mystery far greater than he had imagined. The story he had come to expose now enveloped him in a deeply personal way. "I'll return tomorrow," he promised. "I have more questions." "We'll be waiting," replied Donna Cecilia, her gaze seeming to see right through him. "But remember, some truths once revealed cannot be forgotten, and knowledge always comes with a price." As he walked to meet his team, Tiago touched the envelope in his pocket. The words of a mother he had never known awaited, ready to unveil secrets that could change everything he believed about himself and the world. The colonial inn where Tiago and his team were staying was just a few blocks from the asylum. The 18th century mansion, with its creaking wooden floors that groaned with every step, seemed the perfect setting for the mysteries unfolding around them. In his room, Tiago stared at the still-sealed envelope lying on the bed. "You're not going to believe all this, are you?" asked Carla, seated in a worn leather armchair. "It's clearly just stories made up by elderly women, possibly with cognitive issues." Tiago remained silent, his eyes fixed on the envelope. "We need to focus on what really matters," she continued. "There were probably abuses in that convent, maybe even financial exploitation. But all this talk of supernatural entities and mystical rituals, it's exactly the kind of thing you've spent years debunking." "They knew about my birthmark," Tiago murmured at last, "and they had a photo of my biological mother that was never published anywhere." Carla sighed. "There could be rational explanations for that. Maybe they did some thorough research on you, anticipating your visit. Or maybe they really did know your mother, but they're embellishing the story with fantastical elements." "There's one way to find out," Tiago said, picking up the envelope. He hesitated for a moment, as if fearing what he might find inside, then carefully opened it. Inside were several sheets of thin, yellowed paper, covered in delicate, flowing handwriting. The letter was dated January 1992, just a few months before Antonia's supposed disappearance. Tiago took a deep breath and began to read aloud. "My dear son, if this letter has reached your hands, it means you have found your way back to your roots, even if I am no longer here to welcome you. There is so much I wish I could have told you in person, so many hugs I never got to give, so many bedtime stories I never shared. But fate, or something even more powerful, has charted a different path for us. First, I want you to know that leaving you was the most painful decision of my life. Not a single day passed when I didn't think of you, wondering how you were, if you were happy, if you were safe. The guilt consumes me, but the fear that my presence might put you in danger was always greater. Perhaps the sisters have already told you about the convent of Santa Clara and the rituals that took place there. You, with your rational and skeptical mind, yes, I know this is the path you've chosen in life, might be reluctant to believe. I don't blame you. I doubted it too at first. I entered the convent at 19, not out of religious calling, but fleeing a painful past in Belo Horizonte. My father, your grandfather, was a violent man, and my mother, a submissive woman who never found the strength to protect us. The convent seemed like the perfect refuge, a place where I would finally be safe. For the first few months, everything seemed normal. Prayers, work in the garden, catechism classes for children in the community. Then, on a moonless night, I was awakened by Mother Inez. "You have been chosen," she said. I didn't understand the meaning of those words until I descended into the crypt. What transpired that night changed everything. The ritual, which the sisters have surely described to you, brought me into contact with something I cannot explain. In earthly terms, it was not a god as we were taught in catechism classes, nor a demon as we were warned about in sermons. It was an ancient presence, one that existed before organized religions, before humans even began to name what they could not comprehend. After the ritual, I began to have visions. At first, they were fleeting glimpses. I knew who would knock. At the convent door, before we even heard the knock, I foresaw small accidents in the kitchen. I sensed when someone was lying. Over time, the visions grew more intense and precise. It was in one of these visions that you first appeared. I saw a boy, then a young man, and finally a mature man facing the world with courage and skepticism. You were surrounded by cameras and lights, challenging lies, exposing hidden truths. And I knew instantly that you were my son, a son I had not yet conceived. When I became pregnant months later, without having been with any man, the elder sisters were terrified. Some spoke of a miracle, others of demonic possession. Mother Inez knew the truth. You were the fruit of my communion with the entity, a being conceived at the intersection of two worlds. I was expelled from the convent to avoid scandal. I spent my pregnancy hidden in a small house on the outskirts of Ouro Preto, sustained by secret donations that Sister Cecilia and a few others sent me. When you were born on a rainy October night, I knew immediately that I could not keep you with me. My visions had intensified. I saw clearly that all the women who had participated in the ritual met tragic ends. Some went completely mad, others vanished without a trace, some developed mysterious and incurable illnesses. It was as if the entity was reclaiming what it had granted, and I saw with terrifying clarity that the same fate awaited me. How could I condemn you to witness my downfall? How could I allow you to grow up in the shadow of the danger that surrounded me? The decision to give you up for adoption shattered my heart, but it was made with the deepest love a mother can feel. I chose a family I had seen in my visions, good people who would love and protect you, who would give you the stability I could never provide. In the years that followed, I watched your life from afar. I never interfered, but I followed your steps. I saw when you won your first writing prize in school, when you graduated with honors in journalism, when you began your crusade against false beliefs. Each of your achievements filled me with pride and confirmed that my painful choice had been the right one. Now, my son, I feel my time is coming to an end. The visions show that I will soon be called back. The entity that granted you life now claims mine. I am not afraid. I accepted this fate the moment I took part in the ritual. But before I depart, I must warn you. If you are reading this letter, it means you have begun to investigate your origins and the convent of Santa Clara. I urge you to be cautious. There are powerful individuals who still keep the rituals alive, who still seek the power they grant. And there is something more, something that haunts me in my most recent visions. You, my son, carry in your blood the legacy of what transpired in that crypt. The skepticism that defines your professional life is also your protection, your shield, against the forces that shaped your very conception. But that shield may shatter when faced with the full truth. Along with this letter, I leave behind a journal where I have recorded all my visions concerning you. Ask Sister Cecilia. She has safeguarded it all these years. Within its pages are details that may help you understand not only your past, but the future that awaits you. Always remember, you are more than the circumstances of your conception, more than my son, more than the result of an ancient ritual. You are your own person with the power to choose your path, with all the love a mother can feel. Antonia Galvão. Tiago let the pages fall onto his lap, his face pale. A heavy silence filled the room. Through the window the sun began to set, casting a golden light over the colonial rooftops of Ouro Preto. This is... Carla couldn't finish the sentence. This is madness, Tiago concluded, running his hands over his face. Either an elaborate hoax or my birth mother truly believed in these things. Raphael, who had been silent until then, organizing the recorded material from the asylum, closed his laptop. There are several aspects of this letter that can be verified, he suggested. We can research Antonia Galvão, check the convent's records, look for documents about your birth and adoption. Antonia mentioned a journal, Carla reminded him. If it really exists... Tomorrow we'll return to the asylum, Tiago decided, carefully placing the letter back into its envelope. I want that journal, and I want to know more about this so-called ritual. That night sleep eluded Tiago. Lying in the old bed, he listened to the sounds of the historic city, the wind weaving through the colonial houses, the church bells, tolling the hours, the occasional bark of a distant dog. His mind raced with the day's revelations. Could it really be possible? Had he spent his entire life debunking supernatural phenomena when his own existence might be the result of one? The irony was almost unbearable. He got up and walked to the window. The crescent moon cast its glow over the silhouettes of rooftops and towers. Somewhere within that landscape lay the ancient convent of Santa Clara, now abandoned. The place where it all began. A decision solidified in his mind. Before confronting the former nuns again, he needed to see the convent with his own eyes. At dawn, without informing his team, Tiago rented a car and followed the directions he had managed to extract from a tourist map of the region. The old convent was located about 5 kilometers from the historic center, hidden among lush hills. The dirt road wound its way through centuries-old trees until at a sharp bend, the structure rose imposingly against the morning blue sky. It was a 2-story stone building, with a small tower where the bell once hung. The windows were either broken or boarded up, and vines covered much of the exterior walls. Tiago parked and approached on foot. A rusted iron gate, partially collapsed, guarded the entrance. The inner courtyard was overgrown with tall weeds. Despite its state of neglect, the main structure remained intact, as if defying the passage of time. Impressive, isn't it? The feminine voice behind him made Tiago turn sharply. A middle-aged woman dressed in simple hiking clothes observed him with curiosity. "Sorry, I didn't mean to startle you," she said, smiling. "I'm Teresa, a local historian. I come here regularly to document the state of the building. We're trying to secure funding to restore it as a historical landmark." "Tiago Mendonça," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "I'm researching old convents in the region." The woman's eyes lit up with recognition. "The famous presenter. How interesting. Are you doing a program on Santa Clara?" "Possibly," he replied evasively. "What do you know about this place?" Officially, it was a convent like any other, closed in the 80s due to structural issues, Teresa explained, adjusting her colorful framed glasses. "But unofficially, local legends speak of far more intriguing things." "What kind of legends?" "They say the nuns practiced ancient rituals on new moon nights, that some of them developed inexplicable powers. There are reports of strange lights seen in the crypt windows even years after the convent was shut down." She smiled. "It's probably all made up by the locals to scare children and attract tourists, but as a historian, I find it fascinating how these myths come to be." "Is the crypt still there?" Tiago asked, trying to sound casual. "Oh yes, it's sealed off, but the structure is still there beneath the main chapel." Teresa pointed to a smaller building attached to the main one. "I've tried to get permission to explore it, but the archdiocese always denies it. They say it's dangerous, that the roof could collapse, but personally, I think they're hiding something." "Like what?" "Incriminating documents, perhaps. Records of practices not sanctioned by the church, or simply valuable treasures," she shrugged. "The allure of the unknown, right?" Tiago looked back at the abandoned convent. Something about that place seemed to call to him, as if the very stones held secrets only he could uncover. "Would it be possible to get inside?" he asked, without taking his eyes off the building. Teresa hesitated for a moment. "Officially, no. The place is off limits, but..." She lowered her voice, conspiratorial. "I know a back entrance through the old kitchen. If you're really interested, I could show you." Every professional instinct in Tiago screamed that this was a bad idea. Entering an abandoned building, possibly structurally unsound with a stranger, it was the kind of situation he would normally avoid. But nothing about this investigation was normal. And something stronger than reason was driving him. "Show me," he decided. Teresa smiled again, but this time there was something different in her gaze, something Tiago couldn't quite decipher. "Follow me then, and be ready." St. Clair guards her secrets with utmost care. As they made their way around the building toward the rear, Tiago couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He glanced back once, but saw only the empty path they had just walked. Still, the sensation lingered, as if invisible. Eyes were tracking his every move. The entrance Teresa had mentioned was a small wooden door partially concealed by overgrown bushes. The lock had long since been broken, and the door creaked open with an ominous groan. "After you," Teresa said, holding the door ajar. Tiago hesitated for a brief moment before stepping over the threshold, entering the darkness of the abandoned convent. Little did he know that each step took him deeper, not only into the building but also into the mystery that shrouded his very existence. The interior of the convent smelled of mildew and neglect. Beams of light pierced through holes in the roof, illuminating dust particles that danced in the air. Tiago turned on his phone's flashlight, revealing what had once been the convent's kitchen: stone ovens now covered in moss, rotting wooden countertops and rusted hooks hanging from the ceiling where pots and utensils once dangled. "This way," Teresa directed, leading him through a narrow hallway. "The chapel lies at the heart of the convent, and beneath it, the crypt," Tiago finished. The hallway opened into a cloister, a square courtyard surrounded by arched walkways. At its center stood a dry fountain, adorned with a weathered statue of the Virgin Mary. The silence was almost absolute, broken only by the sound of their footsteps and the occasional chirping of birds that had made nests in the abandoned structure. "It's remarkable how time feels different in here," Teresa remarked, her voice echoing faintly. "I can almost see the nuns walking in procession, hear their hymns." Tiago didn't respond. He was absorbed in the atmosphere of the place, struck by an inexplicable sense of familiarity. It was as if he had been there before, as if he knew every stone, every arch, every shadow. They crossed the cloister and arrived at a heavy wooden door, adorned with religious carvings. It was locked. "This is the entrance to the chapel," Teresa explained, "but this isn't how we'll enter. There's a secondary passage, used by the novices to clean the altar without disturbing prayers." She pointed to a smaller, almost unnoticeable door in the side wall. The secondary door gave way easily to a push. Inside, the chapel emerged in the dim light: dust-covered wooden pews, a cracked marble altar, and shattered stained glass windows. That must have once been magnificent. "And the crypt?" Tiago asked, his voice oddly loud in the sacred abandoned space. Teresa pointed to the floor behind the altar. "There's a staircase there, hidden beneath a trapdoor. It was once used to bury the Mother Superiors and high-ranking nuns," they said as they approached the indicated location. Beneath layers of dust and debris, Tiago spotted the outline of the trapdoor mentioned earlier. He crouched down and began to clear the surface. "Let me help you," Teresa offered, kneeling beside him. Together they removed the accumulated debris, revealing a dark wooden door set into the ground, fitted with an iron ring for lifting. It seemed sealed by time, but when Tiago pulled the ring, the trapdoor opened with surprising ease, as if it had been used recently. A stone staircase descended into darkness. A cold, damp draft rose from the opening, carrying with it a peculiar odor, not just of mold and earth, but something more, something Tiago couldn't quite place. "Are you sure you want to continue?" Teresa asked, a strange glint in her eyes. "What you're searching for might be more unsettling than you imagine." "How do you know what I'm searching for?" Tiago shot back, suddenly suspicious. Teresa smiled, an enigmatic smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Everyone who comes to Santa Clara is searching for something: answers, confirmation, absolution, or perhaps, in your case, origins." Before Tiago could question her further, she was already descending the steps, disappearing into the darkness. After a moment's hesitation, he followed, the beam of his phone's flashlight casting a precarious glow on the path ahead. The staircase was longer than it appeared, spiraling deep into the earth. When they finally reached the bottom, they found themselves in a vast chamber, its vaulted ceiling supported by sturdy columns. Niches in the side walls displayed skeletal remains, the mortal remains of the convent's most revered nuns. But it wasn't the bones that captured Tiago's attention. At the center of the crypt stood a stone altar, not an ordinary Christian altar, but something older, more primal. It was a monolith of dark stone, carved with symbols that seemed to belong to no known religion. "The altar of communion," Teresa murmured, approaching it with reverence, "exactly as described in the accounts I've found." "What accounts?" Tiago asked, a chill running down his spine as he stepped closer to the monolith. Old diaries, letters, confessions. The historical archives of Ouro Preto hold more secrets than people realize. Teresa ran her fingers over the symbols etched into the stone, but no document accurately describes what truly happened here. The words seemed to falter as the nuns struggled to explain. Something in her tone set off alarms in Tiago's mind. There was too much knowledge, too much familiarity with matters that a simple local historian shouldn't have understood so deeply. "Who are you really, Teresa?" She turned to face him, and for a moment Tiago thought her eyes glimmered. "In the darkness. Someone who, like you, is searching for answers. My grandmother was a nun here. She took part in the rituals. She passed on the knowledge before she left." "Left?" "Disappeared," Teresa corrected, "like all the others who took part in the communion, like your mother." Tiago felt his blood run cold. He hadn't mentioned his connection. Said to Antonia, "How do you know about my mother?" "Ouro Preto is a small town, Tiago. Your visit to the asylum didn't go unnoticed. The former nuns have been waiting for your arrival for a long time, and there are others, like me, who have also been waiting." "Others? What others?" "The keepers of the tradition, those who keep the flame of the communion alive, even after the convent was closed." Tiago took a step back, instinctively putting distance between them. "Are you telling me these rituals still happen?" Teresa didn't answer directly. Instead, she gestured to the floor around the altar. Tiago aimed his phone's flashlight and saw what he hadn't noticed before, fresh marks in the dust. Concentric circles drawn on the ground, remnants of candles, drops of a dark liquid he didn't want to imagine. "The last ceremony was 3 nights ago," Teresa said calmly, "during the new moon." A shiver ran down Tiago's spine. This was beyond what he had expected to find. Not just traces of an ancient cult, but evidence that it was still active. He remembered the words of the former nuns at the asylum, about powerful people keeping the tradition alive. Who takes part in these rituals? And why? Participants come from all corners, people seeking power, knowledge, transcendence. As for the why, she paused meaningfully, for the same reason the nuns did it, to pierce the veil between worlds, to receive the gifts. "Do you really believe in that?" asked Tiago, unable to hide the skepticism in his voice. "It's not a matter of belief," replied Teresa, her words echoing those of Donna Helena. "It's a matter of experience. The gifts are real, Tiago. Foresight, clairvoyance, the power to heal. It's all real. But, like any power, it comes at a cost. Disappearance, madness, deterioration," Tiago listed, recalling his mother's letter. "Yes, the entity does not grant its gifts freely. Sooner or later, it claims what is its due." "What entity is this? Does it have a name?" Teresa smiled enigmatically. "It has many names given by different cultures over the millennia. Some call her Lilith, others Hecate. In local indigenous traditions, she goes by other names. The essence, however, remains the same, an ancient feminine force existing in the interstices between realities." Tiago shook his head, frustration evident on his face. "This sounds like a confusing mix of different mythologies. Mythologies are merely human attempts to comprehend the incomprehensible," Teresa countered. "But you didn't come here to debate theology, did you? You want to know about Antonia, about her birth." "How do you know so much about me?" "Your story is now part of our tradition. The seer's son conceived through communion, destined to unveil hidden truths to the world." She took a step toward him. "Your coming was prophesied by your own mother, did you know that?" "In the letter, she mentioned visions about me," Tiago admitted. "They were not merely visions, they were prophecies. Antonia saw your future with striking clarity. She saw that you would become a revealer of truths, but she also foresaw that one day you would return to your origins and confront your own dual nature." "Dual nature? What are you talking about?" "You are the child of 2 worlds, Tiago. Born from the union of a woman and an entity that exists beyond the veil of ordinary reality. This grants you certain abilities." Tiago let out a dry laugh. "I don't have supernatural abilities. I'm just a skeptical journalist." "Are you?" Teresa moved closer, her eyes locked on his. Have you never felt an inexplicable intuition about the people you interview? Never instinctively known when someone was lying? Never had premonitions that came true in surprising ways? Her words struck a deep chord within Tiago. Indeed, he had always possessed an almost supernatural ability to detect lies. It was what made him so good at his job. And occasionally, he had vivid dreams that seemed to predict future events. But he had always attributed these abilities to sharp observation, a sensitivity to subconscious patterns. He had never considered the possibility of something supernatural. I see by your expression that my words have struck a nerve, Teresa observed. You know you're different. You've always known. Even if I were to accept this madness, Tiago countered, taking another step back, what does it have to do with my current investigation? I came to find out what happened to my birth mother, not to embark on some mystical journey of self-discovery. The two are inextricably linked. Antonia's fate and your own are part of the same tapestry. And there is something she left for you, something beyond the letter. The diary, Tiago recalled. She mentioned a diary with her visions. Yes, the diary, but there's something else, something the former nuns didn't mention because they didn't know it existed. And what would that be? A ritual object. Something Antonia took from the crypt before she left. Something that in the right hands can reopen the portal between worlds. Tiago stared at her with growing suspicion. Why are you telling me this? What do you want from me? We want you to complete the circle, Teresa replied simply. To take your place as a son of the communion, to use your gifts not to debunk others' faith, but to reveal deeper truths. And if I refuse? Teresa's smile vanished, replaced by a grave expression. Then your mother's fate will be yours as well. The entity does not take kindly to rejected gifts, Tiago. The abilities you possess, even if you deny their origin, come from her. And sooner or later, she will collect her debt. A muffled sound above them interrupted the conversation. Footsteps, someone had entered the chapel. Who else knows we're here? Tiago whispered. No one, Teresa replied, suddenly alert. But the guardians have ways of knowing when this place is disturbed. More sounds, muffled voices, the dragging of heavy objects. Someone was blocking the exit. We need to leave. Now, Teresa urged, grabbing Tiago's arm. There's another way out, a tunnel that leads to the abandoned mines. Come. Everything happened in a dizzying rush. Teresa pulled him behind one of the columns, revealing a narrow passage hidden in the shadows. As they squeezed through the damp tunnel, Tiago could hear the sounds of pursuit, voices and footsteps closing in on the crypt. The tunnel seemed endless, winding through the bowels of the mountain. Tiago had completely lost his sense of direction, blindly following Teresa, guided only by the faint glow of her phone. Who are they? He asked, panting during a brief pause to catch his breath. The other guardians, Teresa replied. Not all of them agree on what to do with you. Some believe you should be eliminated for posing a threat to the tradition. Others, like me, believe your destiny is to join us. So you're helping me? I'm giving you a chance to choose your path, but we don't have much time. After a few more minutes in the underground labyrinth, they reached a staircase leading to a wooden trapdoor. Teresa pushed it open with effort, and daylight flooded the tunnel. They emerged in a wooded area, a few kilometers from the convent. In the distance, Tiago could see the rooftops of Ouro Preto. Go to the asylum immediately, Teresa instructed, her breathing still uneven from the run. Ask for your mother's diary, and then leave the city as quickly as possible. What about you? I'll distract the others, buy you some time. Tiago hesitated. Why are you helping me, Teresa? What do you gain from this? For a moment, the woman's confident facade wavered, and a genuine vulnerability shone through her eyes. My grandmother also vanished after participating in the rituals. I always believed that if I followed the tradition, I'd uncover what happened to her. But the deeper I go, the more I realize we're all being manipulated by something we don't fully understand. She glanced nervously over her shoulder, as if fearing they were being followed. Now go. And Tiago, be careful with the diary. Antonia's visions are powerful. They can alter your perception of reality. Without waiting for a response, she turned and disappeared into the trees, leaving Tiago alone with a whirlwind of questions and a growing dread of what he was about to uncover. The steep streets of Ouro Preto had never felt so endless. Tiago hurried toward the asylum, constantly glancing over his shoulder, the unsettling feeling of being watched never leaving him. His phone wouldn't stop ringing, Carla, frantic over his sudden disappearance. After ignoring the first few calls, he finally answered. "Where are you?" Her voice overflowed with worry. "We've been looking for you for hours." "I'm on my way to the nursing home," he replied, breathless from the uphill climb. "I found the convent. And no, I'm not." "Okay, we need to talk, but not over the phone." "We're heading to the nursing home right now," Carla said. "Raphael found something about one of the former nuns that you need to know." Tiago hung up, his mind a whirlwind. What he had witnessed in the crypt felt like something out of a nightmare. Evidence of contemporary rituals, a pursuit, revelations about his own nature. Part of him still tried to rationalize it all as an elaborate charade, perhaps orchestrated by some group trying to thwart his investigation. But another part, one he rarely listened to, whispered that there was truth in Teresa's words, in his mother's letters, in the piercing gazes of the elderly former nuns. When he arrived at the nursing home, he found Carla and Raphael waiting. At the entrance, the expressions on their faces told him something was wrong. "What happened?" Tiago asked. "One of the former nuns," Raphael replied gravely. "Donna Dulce. She collapsed this morning right after we left yesterday. She's in critical condition at the municipal hospital." "And that's not all," Carla added, lowering her voice. "Donna Helena has disappeared. She's just gone. No one saw her leave the nursing home." Tiago felt his stomach drop. His mother's words from the letter echoed in his mind. Everyone who took part in the ritual met a tragic end. Sister Conceição greeted them with a troubled expression. "Mr. Mendonça, I'm glad you're back. Donna Cecilia is extremely agitated. She insists on speaking with you urgently." They were led to a small room at the end of the hallway. Donna Cecilia sat by the window, her wrinkled hands clutching a small bundle wrapped in ancient fabric. When she saw Tiago, her eyes lit up with a mix of relief and urgency. "Thank God you're back," she said, gesturing for him to come closer. "We don't have much time." "What happened to Donna Dulce?" "And where is Donna Helena?" Tiago asked, pulling up a chair to sit across from the elderly woman. "It has begun," she replied simply, as if that one word explained everything. "The cycle is closing. First, Helena. She was called. We always knew she would be next. And Dulcie." Her voice faltered. She resisted the call. The price is always steep when one tries to resist. "Called by whom?" Tiago pressed, leaning forward. "The same entity that supposedly knew my mother." Donna Cecilia nodded gravely. "You were at the convent today, weren't you? You felt her presence in the crypt." Tiago exchanged quick glances with Carla and Raphael. He hadn't mentioned his visit to the convent to anyone but them. "How do you know that?" "The same way I know you met Teresa Oliveira," the elderly woman replied. "She is the granddaughter of an old sister of our vocation. She too took part in the rituals." "She mentioned her grandmother," Tiago confirmed. "Said she disappeared, like the others." "Yes, and now Helena as well. And soon Dulce." Donna Cecilia sighed deeply. "And I will be next. I can feel the call growing stronger each day." "What are you two talking about?" Carla interrupted, frustration evident in her voice. "What calling? What entity? We need concrete answers, not more mysteries." Donna Cecilia faced her with a surprising calm. "Young one, there are truths that do not fit into your concrete categories, realities that defy your rational understanding. But you are right about one thing. Tiago needs answers. And that is why I have held on to this for so long." She extended a wrapped package to Tiago. It was something heavy, about the size of a large book. "Antonia's diary," she explained. "And something more, something she entrusted only to me before she left." With slightly trembling hands, Tiago unwrapped the package. Inside was indeed a leather-bound diary, aged and worn, with the initials AG embossed on the cover. But there was also a second object, wrapped in black silk, a small silver locket adorned with the same strange symbols Tiago had seen on the altar in the crypt. "What is this?" he asked, holding up the locket. "The key," Donna Cecilia replied. "Antonia took it from the convent before she was expelled. It is a very ancient artifact, used during rituals to facilitate passage. Communion." Tiago examined the object skeptically. It looked like a piece of archaic jewelry, with symbols that blended elements from different religious traditions. At its center was a black stone that seemed to absorb the light around it. "Why would my mother take this?" "To protect it," Donna Cecilia explained, "and to give you a choice when the time came." "What choice?" "To embrace your heritage or reject it entirely." The elderly woman leaned forward, lowering her voice. "The locket is a conduit. With it you can access the same power your mother accessed, to see beyond the veil, to know hidden truths. But you can also destroy it, severing your connection to the other side permanently." Carla let out an exasperated sigh. "This is absurd. We're wasting time with charms and superstitions when we should be looking for rational explanations for what happened to Tiago's mother." "I agree," said Raphael. "This feels more like a horror movie script than a serious journalistic investigation." Donna. Cecilia didn't seem offended by their words. Instead, she addressed Tiago directly. "Their skepticism is understandable. They haven't experienced what we have. They haven't seen what we've seen." Tiago tucked the medallion into his pocket and quickly flipped through the journal. The pages were filled with elegant handwriting, the same as in the letter. There were dates, notes, strange diagrams, and occasionally what appeared to be sketches of visions, faces, places, events, all rendered with unsettling precision. And then his eyes caught something that made his heart skip a beat. A drawing of him, not as a child but as an adult, exactly as he looked now seated in a television studio. The drawing had been made in 1991, nearly a decade before his first television appearance. "How?" he murmured, showing the page to Carla and Raphael. "How could she have known?" "Now you're beginning to understand," said Donna Cecilia with a sad smile. "Antonia saw far beyond the present. She saw your future, your purpose, and she also saw the dangers you would face when you finally uncovered the truth about your origins." "What dangers?" "The Guardians, for starters. As Teresa must have mentioned, there are factions. Some see you as a threat to be eliminated, others as a promise to be nurtured." She paused meaningfully. "But the greatest danger comes from the entity itself." "What does it want from me?" "The same thing it wanted from all of us. Communion. A bridge between worlds." "But you're different, Tiago. You already carry a part of it in your blood. That makes you more valuable to, and more threatening." A sudden crash interrupted the conversation. The bedroom door was violently flung open. Two men in dark suits entered, their faces expressionless, followed by an elegant middle-aged woman whom Tiago immediately recognized, Dr. Elisa Mendes, one of Brazil's most powerful businesswomen and the primary sponsor of his program. "Dr. Mendes?" Tiago stood up, bewildered. "What are you doing here?" "Saving you from yourself, Tiago," she replied with a cold smile. "Or rather, saving years of investment. I can't allow you to ruin your career and our partnership with this reckless investigation." Tiago noticed the men accompanying her kept their hands inside their jackets, their posture suggestive. "How did you know where to find me?" "I have eyes everywhere," she answered, stepping closer to Donna Cecilia, who stared at her with a mix of recognition and disdain, especially when it comes to matters related to the convent of Santa Clara. "You're one of them," Donna Cecilia said, without a trace of doubt in her voice. "One of the Guardians." "Guardian, participant, beneficiary," Dr. Mendes shrugged. "Labels are so limiting, don't you think? I prefer to see myself as a facilitator of untapped potential." She turned to Tiago, extending her hand. "The medallion and the diary, please. They don't belong to you." "They do," Donna Cecilia countered, Antonia left them specifically for her son. Antonia stole the medallion from the convent, Dr. Mendez shot back, her gaze never leaving Tiago. It's the property of the order. As for the diary, it contains sensitive information that could be dangerous in the wrong hands. Tiago took a step back, instinctively shielding the items. Why did you sponsor my program all these years? Why support someone who exposed the very kind of beliefs you seem to defend? A calculated smile spread across the businesswoman's lips. Keep your friends close, and your enemies even closer. Moreover, your crusade against lesser charlatans served our purposes perfectly. Every suburban healer you exposed strengthened. The public's skepticism, while we operated in the shadows far from the spotlight. So all of this was what? A conspiracy to keep me under control? An insurance policy, she corrected. We knew that one day you would uncover the truth about your origins. When that happened, we wanted to be in a position to guide you or contain you if necessary. Carla stepped forward, placing herself between Tiago and the businesswoman. This is madness. Let's get out of here now. No one is going anywhere, declared Dr. Mendez, making a subtle gesture to her men, who immediately advanced. Not without giving me what I came for. Tiago, Donna Cecilia called urgently. The medallion, use it now. Don't be ridiculous, old woman, Dr. Mendez sneered. He wouldn't even know how to activate it without the proper ritual, without the preparation. But something in Donna Cecilia's gaze ignited a certainty in Tiago. Without a second thought, he pulled the medallion from his pocket and clasped it firmly between his hands. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. A sensation of intense heat spread from his hands throughout his body. The black stone at the center of the medallion began to pulse with an inner light, like a beating heart. And then, in a fleeting instant, the veil of reality seemed to tear apart. The walls of the room vanished. In their place, Tiago saw chaotic images, the convent in different eras, women in white robes dancing around the altar in the crypt, his pregnant mother frantically writing in her diary. And behind it all, a feminine presence whose form seemed to constantly shift, now beautiful and seductive, now terrifying and monstrous. He sees, Donna Cecilia whispered in awe. The entity has recognized him. Stop him, shouted Dr. Mendez. But her men hesitated, paralyzed by the surreal scene before them. The visions grew more intense. Tiago saw Dr. Mendez in a younger version of herself, participating in the ritual in the crypt, eagerly drinking in the power offered. He saw how she had used the abilities she gained to build her empire, predicting market movements, manipulating competitors, always staying one step ahead of everyone. And he also saw the price she would pay, a dark fate that awaited all who partook in the communion. You are dying, Tiago said, his voice strangely altered. The entity is consuming you from within. Every vision, every accurate prediction accelerates the process. You have less than a year left. The businesswoman's face paled. How can you know this? Not even the oldest guardians. Because he is the child of the communion, interrupted Donna Cecilia, a triumphant gleam in her eyes. The only one born from direct contact with the entity. His connection is purer, stronger. The visions ceased as abruptly as they had begun. Tiago staggered, feeling exhausted, as if he had just run a marathon. The medallion in his hands was now cold, the black stone dull and lifeless. Seizing the moment of confusion, Raphael and Carla grabbed Tiago by the arms, pulling him toward the door. Dr. Mendez's men, still stunned by what they had witnessed, didn't react in time. Run! Shouted Donna Cecilia. And remember, the choice is yours, Tiago. It always has been. They raced through the asylum hallways, descended the stairs, and burst out into the sunlit streets of Ouro Preto. Without stopping to discuss, they jumped into Raphael's rented car and sped away. Only when they were on the road toward Belo Horizonte did Tiago finally break the tense silence that had settled in the vehicle. You saw it, didn't you? What happened when I touched the medallion? Carla and Raphael exchanged uneasy glances in the rearview mirror. We saw something, Carla admitted reluctantly. A kind of distortion in the air around you. And your eyes, they changed for a moment. How are they different? Darker, Raphael replied, his focus fixed on the winding road ahead. Almost completely black, and you said things about Dr. Mendez, about her dying, as if you could really see inside her. Tiago glanced down at the medallion in his hands, now seemingly lifeless. His mother's journal rested on his lap, its pages filled with secrets he had only just begun to unravel. "What do we do now?" Carla asked, her voice betraying the fear she felt. "We can't just ignore what happened. Dr. Mendez controls half of the station's administrative board. If we go back to São Paulo, We're not going back," Tiago declared. "Not yet. First, I need to fully understand what's going on. I need to know more about my mother, about this so-called entity, about myself." "And how do you plan to do that?" Raphael challenged. Tiago paused for a moment. "I need to find Teresa again. She seemed to know more than she let on, and I need to read Antonia's journal, page by page." "You're not actually buying into all this madness, are you?" Carla asked, turning to face him from the back seat. "Supernatural entities, mystical rituals, psychic powers, everything you've spent your entire life debunking." "I don't know what I believe anymore," Tiago admitted, running a hand over his weary face. "But I know what I saw, and I know there's a real connection between me and what happened at that convent. If my birth mother really disappeared because of it, I need to uncover the truth, not just for her, but for myself." He gazed out the window at the lush green mountains of Minas Gerais, blurring past as the car picked up speed. Somewhere within the vastness of that landscape lay the answer to the mystery of his origins, and perhaps the key to his future. "What happened at the asylum was just the beginning," he said, more to himself than to his companions. "The real investigation starts now." In the days that followed, Tiago immersed himself in the pages of Antonia's journal. Staying at a small inn on the outskirts of Belo Horizonte under false names, he and his team began piecing together the puzzle. The journal revealed a woman of extraordinary intelligence and keen sensitivity who had meticulously documented not only her visions, but also the history of the Santa Clara convent and the rituals that took place there. It contained genealogies of families tied to the tradition, maps of locations where portals to the other side were said to open, and detailed descriptions of the entity that visited the ritual participants. On one of the final pages, Tiago found what appeared to be a testament, words addressed directly to him. "My son, when you read these words, you will face a choice that will define not only your destiny, but potentially that of many others. The medallion I left for you is both a blessing and a curse. With it, you can access hidden knowledge, see beyond the veil that separates the worlds and become a true revealer. But remember, every vision comes at a price. Every truth revealed brings you closer to the same fate that awaits me. The entity gives nothing freely. You have 3 paths before you. You can destroy the medallion and the journal, severing your connection to the other side permanently. You will live as an ordinary man, without the gifts, but also without the burden. You can use the medallion to expose the truth about the Santa Clara convent, the guardians, and the entity. It will be your greatest investigation, but also your last. Or you can take a third path, one I only glimpsed in my most obscure visions. You can find a way to transform the very nature of the communion itself, to redefine the terms of contact between our world and the other. Whatever you choose, remember that you have never been alone. Even from afar, my love has accompanied you every step of the way. And regardless of the blood that runs through your veins, you are above all human, with all the fragility and all the greatness that entails. With eternal love, your mother, Antonia. Tiago closed the journal, feeling the weight of the decision he had to make. He looked at Carla and Raphael, who had faithfully accompanied him on this surreal journey, risking their careers and potentially their lives. He looked at the medallion, seemingly harmless yet carrying the power to breach the boundary between worlds. And then he knew what he had to do. Weeks later, the entire Brazil watched the most controversial and widely viewed episode in the history of the show Revealed Truth. In it, Tiago Mendonça exposed not charlatans or false prophets, but the full story of the Santa Clara convent. He presented evidence, testimonies, and historical documents. He showed images of the abandoned convent, the crypt with its strange altar and the archaic symbols carved into the stone. He spoke about his biological mother, his own adoption, and the search for his origins that had led him to unexpected discoveries. He described the network of powerful guardians who kept the tradition of the communion alive, using the gifts they obtained to manipulate markets, influence politics, and amass power. What he did not reveal was the medallion, the supernatural nature of the visions, or his own transcendental experience. He presented everything as a conventional journalistic investigation, supported by verifiable facts, authentic documents, and credible testimonies. The impact was immediate and overwhelming. Dr. Elisa Mendez and several other business leaders and politicians mentioned in the report faced investigations, their reputations in ruins. The ancient convent was declared a historical landmark and closed for preservation. The surviving former nuns were granted protection. As for Tiago, he announced at the end of the program that he would be stepping away from television temporarily. To reconnect with my roots, he explained, and to reflect on the true meaning of the pursuit of truth. What the audience didn't know, what no one except Carla and Raphael knew, was that Tiago had chosen the third path suggested by his mother, neither to sever his connection with the other side, nor to exploit it for sensational exposure, but to find a way to transform the very nature of communion itself. With Antonia's diary as his guide and the medallion as the key, he embarked on a journey to fully understand his abilities, to learn how to wield them without being consumed by them, and perhaps to establish a new kind of contact with the entity from the other side, not based on submission or exploitation, but on mutual understanding. One night, months after his farewell from television, Tiago found himself alone on the balcony of a secluded house high in the mountains of Nova Friburgo. The medallion rested in his hands, its black stone pulsing softly with a life of its own. Closing his eyes, he allowed his mind to expand, his consciousness to pierce the veil between worlds. And there, on the threshold between realities, he felt a familiar presence, not threatening as he had feared, but curious, ancient, infinitely complex. "Mother?" he whispered, not entirely sure to whom or what he was speaking. There was no answer in words, but a sense of recognition flowed through him, like a long-awaited embrace. And Tiago understood that his true journey was only just beginning. The truth, as his mother had foreseen, was neither simple nor comfortable. It could not be confined to categories of real or supernatural as right or wrong. It was multifaceted, contradictory, constantly evolving, much like the human experience itself. And he, a child of two worlds, was uniquely positioned to become not just a revealer of lies, but an interpreter of deeper truths, a mediator between realities that most people could scarcely glimpse. It was an immense responsibility, an unprecedented challenge. But for the first time in his life, Tiago Mendonça felt whole, reconciled with his past and open to the infinite possibilities of the future.